We need to empower women to enforce their own boundaries. This is what feminism should be about, helping women to embrace their agency, to act as their own subjects in the world. The big criticism of, patriarchy is that women are objectified, women are just objects. Well, then change that. Assert yourself as a subject. That would be a feminist move. One of the points that you made, that's something that I have thought about for a long time, is that, it may be doing women a disservice to be conflating violent, forcible rape without consent, and this little bit more nebulous type of sexual assault where it's more seduction. It's overcoming your will. It's not forcing you. It's getting you to yes when, you don't actually want to say yes. It's
heavy
like the
persuasion.
Same techniques. Yeah, the same techniques as like the sleazy, used car salesman where you're like, no, I really don't want that Kia, but somehow they managed to talk you into it. And then just to carry the analogy a little bit further, they're more or less honest about how they present that car, in order to get you to buy it. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that Russell Brand is a boundary pusher. I think he's been described as that by several people. I don't know that it's really helping women to try to pretend that these are the same thing, because they're not the same thing, and the solution isn't the same thing. Confronting somebody who is trying to violently assault you without your consent in that situation is clear. That's going to take one, set of skills to deal with. Overcoming a situation where somebody is you're just persuaded against your better judgment, but it just isn't the same thing. And I don't know that it's serving us to pretend that it is.
I have concerns too about some of these allegations, in the sense that the alleged behavior occurred when some of these women were already in a relationship with Russell Brand. And look, I understand that husbands aren't allowed to rape their wives, and just because you're in a relationship with someone, or just because you've had sex with someone 100 times before consensually or whatever, you can still say no. And if you're clearly saying no, then that's assault. I get that. But at the same time, I do think that when there is an established pattern in a relationship of people hooking up, of people having sex, an established pattern of consent, that I could see where there might be situations, particularly if a woman is with a rock star or with a movie star, big shot comedian that she's trying to impress, and she doesn't really want to fully assert her will. You know what I'm saying? One of these wishy-washy situations where she really doesn't feel comfortable, does want to say no, but doesn't really clearly say it. I'm uncomfortable with situations where there's a pattern of consensual behavior in a relationship, and then there's a claim that, well, this one time though, I didn't want to do it, and he pushed my underwear aside, and he pushed his penis into me. Well, do you think, was he necessarily as clear as the woman was that she didn't want that to happen? Because if I were a man, and there was a long established period of consensual sexual activity, I could see situations where maybe it could have a kind of a mix-up. And again, I'm not justifying non-consensual sex in relationships. I'm just saying, though, that I do see a certain, as you said, nebulousness to all this. And I wanted to ask you as well, are you comfortable with the amount of time that has gone by in these cases? Because even with the Masterson thing, and I don't want to get into that whole ball of wax, because people, it's so volatile for people, but let's say that Masterson was totally guilty and he did those things, 20 years ago. I really am uncomfortable with this very long reporting period in which it's just acceptable to say, oh, in 2006 he did this to me, in 2012 he did this to me, in Masterson's case in 2003 he did this to me. That's a long time ago. People forget stuff. They lose track of details. Mores, attitudes change. There are things that Russell Brand doing 10 years ago or 15 years ago that people would just brush off and be like, oh, that's Russell Brand, or, oh yeah, he's just a randy guy, that now in 2023 seems really bad. I would like no more than a 5-year statute of limitations on all this stuff. Even in the media, after 5 years, we don't report it. I don't know. Am I crazy?
I don't think you're crazy. I mean, that's why we have statutes of limitations at all. That's the compromise that's being struck, is that recognizing that, yes, some people aren't going to come forward within those time with meritorious claims that, should win had they been brought forward within that time frame. But the trade-off is, like you pointed out, it's too difficult to defend something like that. You don't have the ability to test the evidence, to challenge the evidence, and make sure that it's truthful in that type of situation, like you do when you have, contemporary reporting. We have gone around and around so many circles with rape laws and sexual assault and workplace harassment, all this stuff for, 50, 60 years, if not longer. One of the things I was thinking of when you were talking about the pattern of consent is that there used to be this doctrine in the law called the hue and cry doctrine. And the idea was that women are basically expected to physically resist, like to the point of, maybe death or physical injury. Like, you're supposed to physically resist. If you don't, then that means you consented. And so for a long time, that's what cases would be tried on, would be proof of, did she fight back or not? So I'm not suggesting we go back to that.
Right.
That's not what we're saying. But it's just that by then trying to conflate situations where you have acquiescence with situations where you have non-acquiescence, they're different. They really do need to be treated differently. The distinction is important. And I think that the problem too is you lose the nuance in that lack of acquiescent situation. Like you're saying, I think sometimes it might be perfectly clear, like you've communicated no multiple times, the person is still continuing to push, and you're finally just like, Jesus, it's easier to just, go along and wait for it to be over than to continue to put up the resistance.
And frankly, anyone who's anyone who's been married or in a long-term relationship knows that there is a non-assaultive version of this, where like one person, and it's not always the man, wants sex, the other person doesn't, and one person is like, come on, or like hugging on you or whatever, and you're like, okay, like that's not assault. It's not assault.
It's called your marital duty. So yeah, and so that's the challenge, and we're in this environment where we're not allowed to have these nuanced conversations anymore, where we're not allowed to talk about the difference between using these persuasive techniques on, a 30-year-old experienced woman and a 16-year-old girl. There is a difference there as well. We're not allowed to talk about, because it sounds like you're victim shaming, right? Or victim blaming. If you suggest, well, we need to empower women to enforce their own boundaries. This is what feminism should be about, helping women to embrace their agency, to act as their own subjects in the world. The big criticism of, patriarchy is that women are objectified, women are just objects. Well, then change that. Assert yourself as a subject. That would be a feminist move. But that comes off, you're not allowed to say that, because that comes off as, oh, I'm blaming somebody for acquiescing in sex that they didn't want. No, you're not blaming people by understanding the circumstances that gave rise to that. It's the same type of, analogy that Camille Paglia used, that she got in so much hot water for, of, when you're thinking about going to the frat house and drinking a bunch of beer and taking your shirt off, think about, would you drive your Rolls Royce into the nice, into the trashiest part of the city and walk away and leave your keys in the ignition? Like, there are just certain precautions that, it's not your fault that people do bad things, but the reality simply is that people do bad things, and you need to be prepared to engage with that for your own protection. So I feel a lot of that. I don't want to see a world where the law is just going back now to infantilizing women. They aren't capable of enforcing their own boundaries, so the law needs to do that for them.
Right. That's right. You said one time, I don't know, maybe months ago, that one of your concerns about all of, not all, but a number of these big media Me Too cases is that, to some degree, a lot of them seem to be pathologizing male sexuality.
Mhm.
And with Russell Brand, I understand Russell Brand with the sex addiction, the self-confessed sex addiction, and a lot of the crazy behavior throughout the years. I'm not saying that that is typical male behavior, typical male sexuality. Yes, it's to the extreme, but for thousands of years and probably beyond, if we get back to our ape-like ancestors, it's been understood that male sexuality generally, and yes, I know women with higher sex drives than a lot of men, so I'm just making generalizations here, but generally it was understood that male sexuality, it is a lot more generally aggressive than female sexuality, and that it up until now has been considered normal for men to verbally pressure or importune women. Like that used to be considered in a way romance, the man under the window, come out please, or the woman who says no, no, but she's hoping that on the 10th time she says no, then the man's gonna then she's gonna say yes, like playing hard to get and everything. We've always understood these sexual dynamics, and my concern now is that to some degree male sexuality, which has always been understood to be aggressive and powerful and strong, and something that women, if they were not interested in, needed to put up a clear resistance to, it seems like all of that now, that basic understanding has just now been pathologized, and behavior that used to be considered normal masculine behavior, or maybe at the more aggressive end of normal masculine behavior and sexuality, it's being pathologized. Do you agree with that?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, what's happened to seduction? Where is seduction gone?
Yeah.
That's not a thing anymore. Apparently now people just come to the bargaining table, they may not bring their lawyer and negotiate the terms of the engagement. And surprise, surprise, Zoomers aren't having any sex. Nobody seems to be satisfied by that situation. We are in such a strange era in human evolution in my perspective, and this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, but I haven't really talked to people about. But it's just this idea I've had that for hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution, for a woman to have sex with a man is putting her life on the line. Okay, it's literally a life or death decision, because you have very high chance that you will get pregnant and die before the advent of medical technology. And so that has kind of been the basic trade, where the woman is willing to give her life to the man for sex for him, okay, and he is willing to give his life for her to protect her. That's the trade-off. That's the life or death situation that human romance used to consist of. And then 50 some years ago, that situation completely changed. It got taken off the table for women, because we have this very readily available, predictable, controllable birth control. You can have sex without any consequences whatsoever now. It took that off of the table. And, I think we're kind of seeing a response to that by men, where if it's no longer this valuable thing that a woman by having sex with you is telling you she's willing to die for this, okay, that's no longer there. So the man no longer values that, and we don't have the depth of those types of relationships anymore, in my opinion, that I think we probably did throughout most of human evolution. Now, of course, am I saying, should we go back to being cavemen? No, I'm not saying we should go back to being cavemen, but I'm just saying this has been a massive shift in our biology and how that controls the way that we relate to each other, that I don't think we've really even necessarily begun to reckon with, let alone reached any kind of logical, perspective on where do we go from here.
I totally agree with that. And, the sexual revolution, it seemed for a while that it was freeing women to have just as much sex as men and to be just as free. And the thing is, like, my mom's generation, which was really the last right before the sexual revolution, or she was really at that switch point with the sexual revolution and the use of the pill and all of that, there were sort of clear, understood, even just several decades ago, as you know, clear understood codes for gentlemanly behavior and ladylike behavior. And And what happened with the sexual revolution is it came along and it said, we don't need those codes. You don't have to be a lady and you don't have to be a gentleman. Let's just have a sexual free for all. And I think now, as a number of people have noted, we're kind of waking up and we've got like a hangover. And the hangover is that suddenly a lot of women, particularly in younger generations, are realizing, or maybe women who were younger and now have grown up, are realizing, you know what, actually, this sexual free for all, it doesn't really work for me. Like maybe I don't want to have no strings attached sex with some movie star or rock star and then be discarded when he's tired of me and on to the next thing. But they don't know, because they don't have even the language anymore for asserting, for demanding gentlemanlike behavior. They don't really understand what this uncomfortable feeling is of being used and discarded. And so instead, something really easy that they can hang it on is, oh, well, consent. I didn't know what I was doing, or I was too young, or he pressured me too much, or this or that, or even perhaps the sexual dynamic got too aggressive and maybe he did assault some people. But I'm saying that people are looking at the effect and not at these causes that need to be examined for what, as you said, has transpired in our society recently. And look, I'll say this all day. I'm not a traditional person. I'm not legally married. Yes, I had a lot of sex before the relationship I'm in now. I should probably cut that out, right? Dylan Dennis. Dylan
No,
Dennis.
your fans will love that.
Dylan Dennis is going to be posting pictures of me before you know it with strange men.